don't you?
Friday the 13th.
It was Friday the 13th.
Oh.
It was the first of two Friday the 13ths in this year. We only have two this year, so that's pretty good. So Friday the 13th, you know, the phobia of Friday the 13th is called the parascavida phobia.
Oh.
Now, an interesting thing, I was looking up Friday the 13th, you know, that didn't become popular as a fear or a phobia till the 19th century. We all get freaked out about Friday the 13th or even the number 13, which has its own phobia name. I'll get to that in a second. Until less than 200 years ago. This is a recent bunch of junk that we've somehow accepted into our lives. Now, the fear of number 13, that's been around maybe a little longer, but I'll get to that in a second. That is called triskaidekaphobia. Tris as in three, chi as in and, deca as in 10, phobia. So 3 and 10 phobia. Now that has a little story. I couldn't find any story about where Friday the 13th phobia comes from, but there is a story about where the number 13 phobia comes from. There's this thought that Judas, as in Judas Iscariot in the New Testament, Judas was the 13th guest at the Last Supper.
Right.
And the date of the Last Supper was the 13th of Nisan, which is the lunar, the Hebrew month that they were at that time. Now, of course, that was on a Thursday. The Last Supper was considered on the Thursday, and those who were brought up Catholic probably know it as Maundy Thursday. And I talk about that usually when we're in the Easter Passover time. And of course, that was the night before Jesus died, which was what?
Good Friday.
On a Friday. So that's where that 13 story comes from. But I found out all kinds of other fun occurrences that have added to this phobia of 13, which thus adds to the phobia of Friday the 13th. In 1888, Jack the Ripper's final victim, possibly his 13th victim, was on Friday the 13th, and then he disappeared and never was heard from again.
Thank goodness.
In 1914, on Friday the 13th, Rasputin became the Russia ruler. In fact, he actually wasn't the ruler because that was during the Bolsheviks' time, or during the time when the Tsar was the leader. But because of his influence on the Tsarina, on Alexandra, he became kind of the ruler, in fact. In 1942, Hitler, on Friday the 13th, used that day to begin major attacks all over Europe and Russia and Greece and Yugoslavia, etc. Here's a fun one. In 1956, Bela Lugosi died on a Friday the 13th. I didn't find out if he died or he was buried on Friday the 13th. One or the other happened, but the fun fact is that he was buried with his Dracula cloak.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh.
And this is my favorite one, but was very sad. In 1970, on Friday the 13th, the Beatles officially disbanded. I didn't know that till I read that in an article. Now, the other interesting thing about Friday the 13th, it's mostly an American and a British phobia. So we're the nutty ones. In the Spanish-speaking countries, it's Tuesdays.
Yes.
How funny.
See, And the Greeks, it's not only, the Italians, they do it on Friday, but it's the 17th. They think that's a weird day. The Greeks, it's Tuesdays as well, because that's the influence of Ares, the god of war, so they kind of got those confused. I don't think they necessarily do that still today, but maybe. Dutch researchers talked about Friday the 13th, and they found that you're less likely to get injured on Friday the 13th because everybody's so, walking on tenterhooks, making sure that they don't do something because it's such an unlucky day. Mark Twain tells a story that he was invited once to this dinner and he realized he was the 13th guest. I don't know if he was thinking about Judas at the time, but he realized he was the 13th guest, and some of his friends realized it as well as he was talking about what he was going to do that next Friday night. And so they were the superstitious types, and they were like, be careful. And he's like, pshaw. Well, he went to the dinner, and he realized there was only food for 12. So maybe it was bad luck for him at that time. There used to be, I don't know if it's still there now, there used to be a 13th club in New York. And this club wanted to make sure that no one really believed this Friday the 13th stuff. And so this was founded in 1882, so that was kind of relatively early in the Friday the 13th stuff. And Captain William Fowler, and so there were a bunch of skeptics, and they would have dinner on Friday the 13th, and the dinner would start where they would enter through an open ladder. So they go in the open, and they sit down for a 13-course meal.
Oh my gosh.
And the whole place, especially in the late 1800s, before there was electric light, they used 13 candles to light the table, and they all made sure they tripped over salt shakers and didn't throw it over their shoulders. And all this was to debunk this whole idea that Friday the 13th was a bad thing. And later, a couple of presidents joined this organization. Grover Cleveland was a member, and Teddy Roosevelt was a member. One more little fact is the Stress Management Center and Phobia Institute estimated that 17 million people are affected by this fear of Friday the 13th. Weird, yeah. Now, I have to say that, well, I'll get to that. No, I'll say it now. I have to say that occasionally when I write something and the number 13 shows up for whatever reason, or I'm looking at a font, like I'm playing with the fonts with the card or something like that, or the banner or something. I'll play with fonts, and then sometimes, oh, that's a little too big, oh, that's a little too small, and then, oh, that's 13. And there's a moment, and it's the perfect size, and there's a moment when I go, oh, and then I'm like, well, that's stupid, what do you mean, 13, it's all a learned fear. Now, I'm not talking about the fears that we have that are logical, like late at night, you don't go down a dark alley downtown in some urban setting. That's a logical fear. And that's not so much of a fear as of, well, this is not smart. Some people have to learn this, but most people realize, probably from our parents telling us, not to put our hands in fire. Or our hands, for those who grew up where there was electric stoves and stuff, to put our hand on the stove when it's on, because we're going to get burned. So it's not so much a fear, but we logically know not to do that anymore. Sometimes it starts out as a fear. So those things are learned. Now, I know you've all heard of false evidence appearing real. Mm-hmm. So that's how fear breaks down. False evidence appearing real. Mm-hmm. And that's another way to tie into the theme of this month, that we bend reality. Because most of the time, if you look at your fears, especially the phobia kind, if you sit down and logically look at them, or look back at them when this supposed future, this negative, scary future doesn't show up, then you realize that you have bent reality, that you've had a fear that was, or a worry that wasn't worth having. You wasted all that time with false evidence appearing real. You bent reality in a way, because in that time that you were all freaked out about this fear that never showed up, you made your life miserable. All those fears are not true. They're just stories we tell ourselves. Fear is closed energy. When we have fear, we close ourselves. We close our hearts. We even close our logical mind, other than our expanded mind, our spiritual mind. our belief mind, our God mind, part of the one mind. We close all that when we get into fear. We don't trust in those moments our connection to the divinity, to the divine, whatever you want to call it, to spiritual intelligence, divine intelligence. We start doubting that. That's how we get into fear. And we're doubting it a lot when it becomes a phobia. Fear is the opposite of faith. I was reminded by that reading something that Bishop Carlton Pearson wrote. Do you all know who Bishop Carlton Pearson? Bishop Carlton Pearson was had a huge mega church in Oklahoma, and he was reading the Bible. He's a evangelical, at one time a fundamentalist type minister, and he was reading the Bible, and he realized that whole idea of going to hell was BS. And he started preaching that, and that didn't go over well. And he lost everything. Got kicked out of his church, got kicked out of the bigger organization, la la la. I've seen him speak. He's a lovely, lovely guy, and he slowly rebuilt through his faith and his knowledge and connecting to the divine, whether you do that through the ideas of Christianity or the ideas of New Thought. He reconnected and people started showing up. So I was reading something and he said fear is the opposite of faith. So when we detach from our faith, and you don't have to use that word faith, because faith sometimes for some of us has a religion word. And that's okay, so don't use that word. But whatever word you're going to turn it into, when you're not connected, when you're not allowing yourself to reveal or vibrate at the divine that you are, or whatever you want to use the other word for divine. I don't care, God doesn't care. When we are detached from that, then fear can show up. Now, I'm not saying that, oh my gosh, if I have fear, somehow I'm a bad person. That's not what I'm saying. It's just how long we sit in that fear. You know, we get used to, by society and how we were brought up, we get used to being in fear of the future that we don't know about. It's the unknown. So if you have a moment you have fear, I have moments where I have fear, and I have to sit my butt down and go, all right, hold on, reconnect. What's going on? Why am I having this fear? And sometimes you have to go through some exercises to reattach yourself to the divinity, to reattach yourself to faith, to reattach your heart to the divine, or however you want to call it. It requires a simple shift in perspective and a surrender to the universe. We have to surrender to the universe. And we can do that in prayer, we can do that in meditation. There's all kinds of spiritual practice ways to do that. But we want to the title of this talk is Driving with Your Headlights Always On. And that's what we want to do. We want to turn our brights on. We want to illuminate what is going on with this fear, or if the fear is constant and continuous, then maybe it's turned into a phobia. But we want to turn the lights on to that and be a witness to that in present time. Because most fears and phobias are about something that is going to happen in the future. Even if you have a fear of going outside, or a fear of heights, or any of those fears, or some of those phobias. So 1, become an observer of your thoughts, ask questions and write it down. So all these fears that we have, I would say 99% of them are unreasonable and have no proof. Oh, you can make up proof. You can talk yourself into believing I have logical proof that my fear is true. It's not true, it's not there. Even if it's happened before, and again, I'm not talking about putting your hand in fire or walking down an urban dark alley. I'm talking about fears of I'm not going to make the bill. I'm not going to, this diagnosis I've gotten from the doctor is always going to be negative. Not necessarily true at all. So become an observer of your thoughts, ask questions, write it down, all the reasons your fear is irrational and kooky. So write it down. Okay, my fear of this is really dumb because. Or my fear of this is coming from the belief that I don't believe that I can achieve X, Y, Z. Okay, and then start breaking it down. Well, why do I believe that? And why is that stupid and kooky? Start writing it down. And as you do that, you start reorganizing it. You start reframing the story you've been telling yourself. It's kind of amazing. I've done it, and I wasn't a big write-down person. You know, they always say, write down your goals, and you make lists and stuff like that. And I was never really big on that. And I realized when I started writing things down, especially these kind of fears, you know, fears that I might have about certain things, not coming true, and they haven't even had the chance to come true yet, so why I'm in that fear, that's one reason I always write down, well, that's dumb, because you're not even there yet. That's dumb because your belief system, your philosophy in life and how the universe works makes that just even dumb to even bring that up in the first place. The XYZ, I won't give specific examples, but they're out there. And so as I start writing this and I start seeing dumb, what are you talking about? All those kind of answers to my wording of this fear, I start laughing at it. I'm just like, wow, I am dumb about that. You know, I'm not a dumb person, but that condition that I put into my life, that condition called fear, is false evidence because it hasn't happened yet. And it doesn't matter if something similar happened before. Why does it have to keep happening like that? And that's true of good things. Why does this good thing have to happen not necessarily better the next time it shows up? Mm-hmm. I've had good relationships with people before, and they ended, and then I have the next relationship, and it's even better. Point in case. Amen. Amen. Thank you very much. Yeah. You know, I don't, as far as relationships, especially personal romantic kind of relationships, I don't go back and well, sometimes you tell stories and get into that kind of venting dumb stuff, but most of the time, I don't like to go back and rant and rave about whatever I didn't like about that, or whatever I didn't like about myself in that situation. What does that do? That just makes me feel dumb and crappy now. Why do I want to relive that? Why do I not want to step forward? And I realize that same similar thing in fears, and I realize that same similar thing when I want something to repeat. When I want something good to repeat, I want it to repeat even better, right? You know, I want to bust through sword and zoom with my good stuff as well as the stuff that doesn't seem so good anymore. The next thing, the second thing, and there's only two, get your hand on your heart. Always get your hand on your heart. Always take a moment, get your hand on your heart, stop and breathe. And imagine, this is a great thing, this comes from a Buddhist tradition. Close your eyes and you imagine tossing one of those nice, perfectly flat stones into a pond and seeing the ripples, you know, when it finally stops, you see ripples going out. It's a cool thing when you observe the ripples it creates. It starts distracting your mind from that dumb fear. And as you become distracted, then you can take over and bring in the positivity, the abundance, the real smarts that are coming through your faith and coming through your heart, coming through the universe. You start hearing that, and all those self-sabotaging stuff starts to go away because you start taking control. This fear can take control because we allow it. But that's why I always say, don't necessarily just sit there and go, no, go away, stop. A lot of times that works. But sometimes you just have to open your heart, distract yourself for a second, then step in. There's all kinds of ways to do that. There's all kinds of great practices to do that. Because only our conscious mind can interfere the subconscious mind, which is where all these dumb fears are hiding. So laugh at it. Who cares? So what? So you felt that way. So you even if you did something because of this fear, that ended up being dumb and not worth your time and a waste of your time. So what? Laugh at it. Move forward. Challenge it. Challenge that fear. When you challenge that fear, you remove its power. And I can't challenge your fear. Oh, I may say a few things that will provoke you, or inspire you, maybe even motivate you to move away from that fear if you came to me for counseling or something like that. But I would only be able to do so much. You have to grasp hold of that and take it on your own. So you don't have to do it through counseling or therapy. You can do it yourself. So Ernest Holmes said, the secret of prayer and its power in the outward life depends upon an unconditional faith in and reliance upon this inner presence. Again, you go back to knowing, you go back to this. That's why this works. That's why this purpose worked so well. The universe told me, it came to me through spirit, of course. Where else is it going to come from? This purpose in life, as well as this purpose of this organization, it makes everything else work. And when we go back to this, no matter what's happening in life, when we stop and go back to this, and there's these two ways, there's all kinds of spiritual practice ways that we've talked about, meditation, etc., spiritual mind treatment, affirmative prayer. Well, all of those is to bring us back to this. And when we get back to this, then I don't want to say we empower ourselves, because we are always empowered. We remind ourselves of who we are and our power to step away from whatever the fear is. And then when we do that, boy, does information start coming through about what I need to do next. Especially if it's a fear of, you don't know what to do next about a situation. That could be overwhelming. So we want to live with a spiritual vision. We want to, in achieving your goals, the only thing that gives life meaning. So this is a great question. Something we need to think about. In achieving our goals, is that the only way that we receive meaning in life? That's something to think about. Because we all have goals, whether it's professional or relationship goals or even health goals. We have those. Are those goals what gives life true meaning? I say no. I say our mental state in awakening this all the time, and waking this up every day so that we're vibrating at the speed of the divine, that is our true life purpose. And when we live on this purpose, then all those other purposes, I'm not gonna sugarcoat and say they all come easily, but they all come more easily when we're there. So we want to discover our inner truth. We want to awaken to the universal intelligence. All those things that we talk about every week, all those things is what we step into when those fears show up. And I don't care what the fears are or if they become phobias. We want to practice spiritual right action. We want to know and remember that revealing the divinity in ourselves brings right action into our lives, because then the universe starts informing us or re-informing us if we have these stupid ideas over and over again. Louise Hay said, trust is what we learn when we want to overcome our fears. It's called taking a leap of faith and trusting in the power within that's connected to universal intelligence. Remember, the power that supplies our breath is the same power that created the universe. The opposite of fear is love. So I ask you to affirm through the power of thought. Affirm that love that comes from the universe. Affirm that power that is within you right now. Now, fortunately, it's not Friday the 13th anymore. In fact, today is National Felt Hat Day.
What?
So yes, it's National Felt Hat Day. So those of you who have a burning desire to be Robin Hood, today's a good day because he wore a felt hat. Wednesday, on the 18th, this is a good day. We all want to celebrate this day. Wednesday the 18th is National Rice Krispies Treat Day. Yeah, huh? And if that's not fun enough, Thursday, this will be good for you. Thursday is Talk Like a Pirate Day. There you go. So fears. Friday 13th, it's over. You're done. You're done till December, I believe. And that's it. So now you have from Friday to two months Fridays from now to realize if you have any indication of the 13 being weird. You know, now I go through buildings. Where's floor 13? Because a lot of buildings don't have they have a 13th floor. They just don't call it that, which is kind of dumb. Isn't that dumb? There is a 13th floor. Just because you don't call it that doesn't. So that we could step through all of that, all of those fears, whether it's Friday the 13th, the number 13, or anything, or ones who have become phobias. We can step through those, and we can be brave, and we can especially laugh at it. Because the more we can laugh at ourselves, the quicker we're going to get here. I mean, we're already here, really. You already reveal it in everything you do, good, bad, or indifferent. But to use it for our greatest good, that's what we want to do. So I want to leave you with this affirmation and treatment. So if everyone would please close their eyes. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I am that I am. The kingdom of heaven is within. Between God and me, there is no between. These words, biblical and philosophical, are the truth that I live by. I am reminded of my gift of the wisdom of divine intelligence that flows within me and my sacrament of volition, the ability of choice. So I now choose to look beyond appearances to see the wholeness of every being in every situation. And from there act with love, compassion, respect, wisdom. Any false evidence appearing real is null and void in my life. I live my life only through, with, for, and as my individualized expression of the one Spirit, God. Mother, Father, God, the energy of the Big Bang, the living Spirit Almighty, one, indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause. And I do so intentionally, joyfully, consciously, and with the full embodiment of a life of vitality, prosperity, love, peace, and creativity. I remember my faith. I remember all the love that surrounds me. The divine presence is here, and my headlights are always on to see, know, and reveal the divinity within me. I do this easily, gracefully, gratefully, and with the thankfulness of knowing it has been received right here, right now. As together we say,
And so
and so it is.